Yeah, so I just want to give a very quick introduction, and I won't take too much time because I know that we've got some really excellent presenters on the line who will take you through the very practical and ambitious steps that they've taken on social values. But as EJ pointed to, a lot of debate has raged really about the definition of social value. And it can mean different things to different organisations because inevitably the local context, the operating conditions in which different businesses are operating in will differ. And I think it's great that we're getting to a point where we're far more concerned about what practical actions we can take than nailing down a definition that kind of gets in the way of us taking this action. So broadly put, we consider that social value refers to the positive social, economic, and environmental well-being that we generate. And this is for individuals, including our employees, communities, other businesses, and society overall through the activities that our businesses undertake. So the roots of social value are in sustainability, and we can see that in the Public Services Social Value Act, social, economic, and environmental are all referenced. What we're seeing now is that many businesses are considering the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the associated Sustainable Development Goals as being the bedrock for creating social value. Many businesses' social value policies are in line or one and the same with their sustainability policies as well. So I think for us as built environment businesses, whether we are in the development, construction, or management of buildings and infrastructure, we're well equipped to enable greater quality of life for employees, communities, and downstream users and occupiers. And as I mentioned, the presenters that we've got later on this morning will demonstrate the types of meaningful improvements that can be made to people's lives with a proper commitment to social value. So this next slide just shows a bit of a snapshot of some of the impacts that can affect social value. I would just say it's not all of the impacts. It's not an exhaustive list, and indeed, this is probably due for an update because it's quite heavily weighted to the economic and the social, when actually we know that biodiversity enhancements can positively impact well-being, as do good quality green and blue space, green infrastructure, clean energy, waste management, and so on. These are all intrinsically linked to how people experience life and the quality of their life. So what you see up on the slide now is some of the drivers that sit behind that sit behind social value. So, we find that fundamentally social value is now a part of what clients are requiring of their supply chain. This often also comes in the form of Section 106 planning requirements cascaded down by local authorities, which imputes a local element. So whether it's local employment, it's apprenticeships, training, different forms of community engagement. Another one is shareholder expectations. So for the organisations governed by investors, then obviously shareholders are showing that they are more active now. Similarly, pressure groups and NGOs, and this links a lot with civil society and the changing expectations of communities as well. So we're seeing now that people are prepared to mobilise en masse and to take action to respond to issues that they feel fundamentally affect their quality of life, whether it's home or away. I think the climate action protests last year and which continue, albeit in different forms this year, are one really pertinent example of the fact that we are we're continuing to see increased appetite from civil society and NGOs that are holding businesses to account. So those are some of the drivers that are underpinning this action. Some of you may have seen the industry update that we did on social value. It was released earlier this year, and it followed a survey of school partners, which was undertaken late in 2019, just to take a little pulse take really on where our partners and members sit on social value and to chart some of the changes. And so what we can see from this slide here is that we're looking at almost all of our partners considering social value as an important mechanism for attracting and retaining staff, improving their relationships with the communities that they work in, meeting client expectations, as I mentioned before, reputational management, looking at local authority expectations, investor expectations, and so on. So what was really significant about this update was that we saw a shift away from social value just being conceived as a social or an economic problem, and we've seen a more mature approach that takes a holistic view of sustainability. So some of the benefits that businesses experience as a result of taking social value seriously, investing in it, and measuring it, crucially, is operational efficiencies, improved access to talent, so greater quality of supply chain, enhanced reputation, staff retention and engagement, competitive advantage, and attraction of investment. There are other benefits as well, but that just gives you a sense that the business rationale for investing in social value is there. So the way that our partners generate social value is through employment, training and skills, supplier diversity, community engagement, and environmental enhancements. And the way that social value is measured is it's done in a variety of ways, but we've got increasing sophistication of the tools to enable us to do so. So we've got social value banks, including the Hacked Social Value Bank, for example. We've got the national TOMs, themes, outputs and measures, and they are primarily used by local authorities. So the majority of local authorities will implement social value measurement via the TOMs, which means that a lot of our partners and members, that's their main tool. And then we've got also industry-specific tools, such as the RSSB Social Impact Framework for Rail, and that was developed by Action Sustainability a couple of years ago, and is a sort of industry-targeted way of measuring. So I just want to touch briefly on some of the themes that we have that are underpinning the growing maturity in social value. So first of all, outcomes, or the emphasis on outcomes has really changed. So when social value first began, it was quite input heavy. So this meant that businesses were focusing on more arm's length input-based activities. So really good example of that is donating to a charity. So while that is, it still plays an important role, and a lot of businesses do that, and especially for small businesses who don't necessarily have large pools of resources, of other resources, that can be one really great way of contributing social value. But what we're less able to do with an activity like that is to measure what the outcome is. So from the presenters that we'll hear from later on, we're really seeing that actually with the focus is now on what is the outcome further down the line on an individual's quality of life, and improved life chances and so on. So I think that's a really important shift. The second one, which I've already mentioned, so I won't dwell on, is the emphasis now on values-based action. and we're seeing not only are our communities taking action based on their values, but businesses are starting to align the right thing to do is also, you know, a core business value, and it's on that basis that they operate. And then the third thing I would mention is coming back to the definition of social value. So it's still the case that defining social value for the built environment can cause quite a bit of confusion, which can distract from taking robust action. So at the moment, for example, the UK GBC is running a task force on defining social value for the built environment, which is addressing the fact that planners, procurement teams, investors, sometimes even local authorities don't necessarily know what to require from their delivery partners, and sometimes the requirements are set in quite an inconsistent way. So there are often calls for standardization. I mean, we want to standardize everything, right? That would make life so much easier, particularly around the measurement of social value. But then there's also growing awareness that we need to be quite flexible, with practitioners recognizing that social value needs to be considered in a local context. So back to the point I mentioned earlier about the operating environment being different in different places and the needs being different. So this task group will aim to develop a definition of social value in a way that's relevant to a broad pool of development types, geographies, communities, and provide us as the built environment sector with a bit of a common language. So it's exciting to know that type of work is underway, and it's a bit of a watch this space as we get more clarity. But I think I'll leave it there for now, EJ, and we'll hand over. But yeah, thanks. Let me know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Claire. I can see that some questions are starting to come in, so let me have a quick look at those. I had one for you. So very often we get many of our members with the school are SMEs, and they may be asked in a tender. So let's say you're an SME and you haven't really done any work on social value or fully understand it, and a customer in a invitation to tender kind of says, can you tell us what you're doing to deliver social value? Where do they start? What advice would you give them?
The first thing I would suggest, it's a good question. The first thing I would suggest is if companies are starting at rock bottom, I mean, obviously this is a school event, so most people on the line will know about the school resources. But if not, I would certainly head to the school first of all for the introductory modules on social value. That's a really good first step. But a lot of it is the funny thing about social value is that so many companies are already incorporating into their business as usual activities that will benefit the local community, for example. But we tend to take these for granted. So it's a little bit of a scoping exercise. So a case of getting together the relevant people in your team, working out who your key stakeholder groups are, which you'll know as a business anyway, map your key business activities, and then consider, well, what about our business activities can impact, whether positively or negatively, on the community. So if you're in construction and you're working in, perhaps a relatively confined community area, perhaps your deliveries to site, for example, are causing local disruption on the roads, or increasing congestion. That's one really, really small example. But it's the first step is to work out who your key stakeholders are, who are you touching as a business, and how. And that's step one. And from there, you can start to build up a picture. And you may already have these contingencies in place. You will have, environmental risk management systems in place necessarily. Most people do. You will also have relevant HR policies to help you keep staff engaged and trained, and probably have, if not an apprenticeship scheme, there might be work experience or engagement with schools that you do, or perhaps some staff are involved in you know, in providing business skills assistance to local schools, for instance.
Okay.
It's just capturing what is already being done. A very long answer.
Thank you, Claire. No, that was a good insight. We've got a question from Social Impact Manager at Jacobs here. So, even for larger companies to operate in a competitive market, there is tension between social value impact and cost of provision of services, plus knowledge of local area of operation in order to ensure impact is positive and not negative. Any thoughts on that? I'm sure we'll be touching on that kind of potentially later with the other presentations, but any thoughts from your side, Claire, on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say it would be great to get the perspectives. This is almost one for the end, I think, to get the perspectives of the other panelists. I mean, knowledge of the local area. Yeah, I mean, knowledge of the local area should be the focus, really. But I think a lot of the problem is that some of the requirements, and I'm thinking particularly about Section 106 requirements, they don't even go local. They don't go local enough, if that makes sense. So we've got to be aware of this kind of one-size-fits-all approach and allow some of the nuances of the local context to come in. I mean, there is a tension between social value and other costs, but ultimately, social value done right is going to deliver efficiencies to your business. So it shouldn't really be viewed as a cost. It's just an exercise in valuing the benefit that you have created.
Okay, thanks.
But
thanks,
I think we'll get more. Yeah, it'll be useful to get the insights of the others on this.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. And then the last question before we move on. Often Section 106 can impact on the creation of focused supply chain that has the potential to put the quality at risk. As social value matures, will the client's perspective?
That's a really good question, and it's very much the subject of what we're talking about on this task force with the UK TBC. So I'd love to say a resounding yes to that, but you know, I think it's a relatively emergent agenda. That's why we're still talking about the definition. It's a shame that we are, but we have to as well. So yeah, I mean, as we as an industry develop more of an understanding of it, then we will be upskilling the clients at the same time. And this idea of common language is really important. So knowing what we're all talking about when we're talking about social value is something that we're trying to achieve in the coming months on the task force. So I would just I would be optimistic that yeah.
So we'll all see each other here this time next year to see what's happened. Okay, thanks a lot, Claire. That was fantastic. So we're going to move on now. So next I'd like to introduce Rob Groves, who's Regional Director at Argent, and also Phil Eves, who's Education Coordinator at BAM Construction. And they're going to be talking about how they've been delivering social value, looking particularly at the Paradise project in Birmingham. So Rob, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Right, I mean, most people, I'm just trying to operate the slides. Go down. My apologies here. Good, thank you. Right, I mean, most people know Argent potentially around our King's Cross development down in London. I'll firstly say that I have nothing to do with the King's Cross development. I do occasionally go down there, but obviously not so much recently. It would be fair to say that Argent's reputation, hopefully, as a city centre regeneration specialist, kicked off, sorry, the door's slamming, I'll shut that in a minute, really in Birmingham through the Brienne Place development. And I think I'd like to think that our reputation is built around working with people. And when, I don't know if it's my IT, but the slides move on. Let's try again. When you look at what we do, we're trying to build places for people. I can't actually see the next slide. Has it moved on for others? If anyone can let me know.
Rob, you just need to use your arrow keys on your keyboard.
I have,
right
yeah.
And left. Right and left,
Okay.
not up and down.
Right, let me try this one. Okay, so that is King's Cross. So what I mean, most people know us hopefully through placemaking. It's something which Argent really learned from our Burnley Place development up in Birmingham. And to achieve that, that's all about social engagement. That's about inclusiveness. And that's driven around, I won't quote whom, but when we first started to undertake the King's Cross development and we were talking to a potential office occupier, the fact that they turned their nose up, the fact that we were inviting the local community to use the spaces. And if anyone's been to King's Cross and they see this image at the moment about letting the kids enjoy the fountains. And I think what we said is, look, at the end of the day, if that's the type of occupier you are, then actually this is not the right environment for you, because this is about making inclusive places, not just for the booted and suited people of the city, but also for the people that live and breathe the city. And that's been a driver for us ever since that Brindley Place development back in the mid-90s. And these are just some of those images. I think the key theme, I'm going to be much more general than Claire previously about the way that we approach things, but we try to achieve great places. And you could say that's easily down to hard materials, spending a lot of money on paving and design. It's not about that, actually. It's actually getting the best out of everything and creating the right type of places that attract the right people. So it makes everything around those fountains the kids can enjoy. You put the deck chairs out, let them enjoy those fountains. You get people worrying about health and safety issues. For goodness sake, we'll manage those processes. We'll manage that. But equally, the big driver for us is, and this is something I remember when I first started working for Argent in the 90s as a consultant, working with both their consultants and their supply chain, is to create places, and this is Brindley Place, like this. It isn't just about spending money. It's actually about getting the best out of people. What I mean by that is that we engage both from the local community perspective really early on in the process. My apologies, somebody's opened the door and it's slamming, so I'm going to have to shut the door. The advantage of home working, or possibly not. What we learn is actually to get the best out of our consultants, the best to get out of the contractors, the best to get out of the supply chain, you make them feel proud of what you do. So you engage them very early on in the process. We learned that through Brienne Place. They are ultimately the guys that are delivering this stuff for us. So what you find is human nature. If you work with people and you create a trust and relationship, because most developers, by people's perception, are seen as guys that go and bish, bash, bosh, knock out a development, move on to the next one and don't care. We're passionate about what we do. So we want to work with people that actually want to feel proud of what they're doing. And if you do that, human nature is such that you will get the best out of them. And, so creating places like Brindley, creating King's Cross, and this is another Brindley images, it's all around how to get best social engagement. Now, Paradise is something I've been leading since 2008, and it looks a bit empty at the moment, but that's, dare I say, something to do with the current event. But these are now some live images of Paradise, which we need people in, so hopefully soon. We started to engage with the local community, which is one of the most deprived communities in the UK, Woodward, back in 2008. We didn't put a planning application until 2012, but we had early contractor involvement. We started to talk to them about what is it you want this place to be? How does this place want to operate? And you'll see some images later where we still work with those people. And what that does, it makes people, that whole perception about the type of things that we do in the middle of city centres, it makes them want to be proud of what you do, but also you get their support. And they feel like they're making a contribution to the way the place actually works for them, as well as obviously, of course, the occupiers in the building. So these, again, some more images, hopefully with some more life soon as people come back to the city centres. So I think we're now just about to come on to a video. No, my apologies. It's actually just a reminder of what we were looking at in terms of Paradise. These are some of the early images, and this is what the people of the city and Woodward really didn't like about this place. This is what we're dealing with in terms of the environment that we're working with. And this reminds you of the imagery and the transformation we need, which is why we got such a support from the local community, because these are no man's places. I mean, the irony of Paradise Place stuck there up on the sign. This was the type of thing which people, unless you're an architect and you like the brutalism of the structure in the middle, which is probably 1% of the population, everybody else we spoke to just wanted to see this place go. That architecture of the 60s and 70s failed. It excluded people. It was all about cars and subways. So for us, this was our early consultation with those stakeholders around what do they want to see? They want bright, light places where they can take their kids, feel safe, and have a great environment. So again, subtly black and white image you'll notice there, which is obviously the original, and then the lovely colourful image of the changes we're making to that infrastructure. This is where the video comes in, please, Sophie. So, I can probably. This is really. I'm just going to talk over this. This really reminds me of the, sort of the challenges we faced, and this comes back to that supply chain. We had a great relationship with DSM. The challenges of demolishing that building were immense. It sat on the A38 dual carriageway, which has 250,000 vehicles a day, and we had to take it down while this building was sat partly on top of that tunnel with live traffic run underneath. That type of operation only works when you have a close relationship with your supply chain, you've engaged with stakeholders. We were demolishing these buildings when we had a museum next to it, which was still operational at that time. We were demolishing these buildings where we had the Birmingham City Conservatoire right next to the development as well. And I remember this great image from the BBC up there, were filming what was going on with the activity in Birmingham. And they panned around while we had operations on site, and there was a young lady practicing her violin in one of the rooms of the Conservatoire. We still maintain those relationships. We had good relationships, and that was just through key stakeholder engagement. I'd be fair to say, historically, Argent has probably been not the most process-driven. Our main driver is do the right thing. And actually, we're getting better at the process. But I think since the 90s, I think it's do the right thing means the right thing for both in terms of development, right for the people that are sitting. And one of the key messages that we always send out is we actually get involved in society. We don't do developments where we don't live. I relocated up to here when we took this development on. We already had colleagues up in Birmingham. So for us, we integrate ourselves into that society, not just business, but also from the local community perspective as well. Wait for this to finish and I'm going to flick through because I'm conscious of Phil's. So, sorry Sophie, if we can move on to the next set of slides. No. I think the other big driver here is really around obviously what we've been doing in our supply chain. That flicked through a bit quickly there, and about what we encourage through our section 106 is obviously the contractors with BAM on board is the support through apprentices. And obviously, as you can see an image which was earlier on, the 25 apprentices that BAM took on. It'd be fair to say that we had Korean on board early on in the development. And again, there were similar numbers of apprentices. And that was all through our commitment that we volunteered through our 106 to actually ensure that we engage local people into development. So now that's flicking through. Now this is really, again, is that integration. What you'll see, you may or not see, depends on the size of your screen in the bottom left, is our Argent Birmingham team. And this picks up on what Claire was saying. I mean, we do lots of sponsorships with Lady Woodward, but this was working with St Basil's Homeless. And actually that's our Argent Birmingham team who had to sleep out on the coldest night last year. And really working with them and through sponsorship, but also support. We had colleagues working in the Lady Woodward community, fitting out with BAM, the Christmas ghetto painting. And I think that's that important part about living and breathing where you work. And I think then you get the trust and respect of people. And these are just some of those images. We work with local schools. Some of the images on the bottom right, making the grade. We spent sort of 6 months with them to show them how they could actually come into our industry, whether it was through the contractors, the supply chain, or consultants, or developer. So that was something that was delivered with great success with all our supply partners. So this just gives you, I'm going to run through very quickly now, I'm conscious of time, with the scale of development we're running up, which is a couple of million square feet up in Birmingham. Some images around what phase 1 is looking like. We have PwC in here. It's about great places for them. It's about great, and they again are a very socially active partner. And we're looking at all sorts of things we can do with them. They are looking to make great contributions and take an active part within the city fabric as well through their roles they have with the city and supporting homeless, etc. And then 2 Chamberlain Square, which is the next building which BAM delivering. They completed 1 Chamberlain Square, which is now just PC'd. And obviously looking, if I'm being a bit biased, fantastic. And then phase 2, we're now moving forward. Hopefully this is the next video coming up. I think it'd be fair to say, through that early engagement with the local community, what we've had through planning has been fantastic. It's made them feel a part of this development. And it was nothing to do with me, this is to do with our brilliant place development. But I remember being front of sort of a local community event, and a lady at the front of the audience turned around and said, it was almost embarrassing, because it was nothing to do with me, but at the end of the day, you deliver Brienne Place, you are Argent, we trust you. And that is worth its weight in gold. And I think for us, for some reason we're doing the second video, I didn't touch anything. That worth its weight in gold for us. It feels like we're really adding something to it. I'm going to flick on, because I think we're on the second viewing of this, on this video. Thank you, Sophie. I'll get back to the slides. So I think on phase 2, again, that early engagement, we spend years working with people, but also the supply chain. I mean, it's so important, because ultimately, and I don't want to upset main contractors on the development, it's a supply chain that are building this. And we've worked with our next building on phase 2 is a very complicated structure over the A38, and we had to work with steel fabricators very early on to ensure that we got the right solution for it. And then on phase 3, which is the one we're now looking at, you may have seen, again, engagement with the public. We're now delivering residential developments for the city, 350 units. A lot of excitement around this, and obviously offering needed, if you like, residential developments for Birmingham city centre, which is obviously something which Birmingham was trying to strive forward, lacking residential numbers in the past. So to us, it is about people, it's engagement. Our next on phase 3 is going to be driven around the sustainability. You know, we've always gone for BREEAM excellent, outstanding where we can. We now are looking at a whole different world. And what we're working at the moment is our next building is our current building 1 Centenary Way is going to be a fully electrified building, air source heat pumps. We're working with the supply chain on that. We're looking at how we can make it a smart building. But actually the next building beyond that, which we're just about to start, is a whole generation different, because the build and the fabric of the building has got to change to be able to meet that criteria of sustainability. So there's really exciting things coming up in the next couple of months about driving through a truly net zero building. And I think there's an awful lot of learning, and a lot of that's going to come through with close working with a very different world in terms of delivering construction development. I'm now going to pass on to Phil, and our apologies about the door slamming, but I'm a great believer in working in the office, that's what I'm going to say. So thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Right, I'm Phil Eves and I work for BAM Construction, and here's my first poll question. So of the 5 themes currently featured in the social value portal, which do you feel is the most important? So they have jobs, growth, social, environment, or innovation. So if you'd like to place your votes now, and I'll do mine as well at the same time. Okay, I think I've done that correctly. Hopefully that will turn into a poll. Okay, scroll down there. So, yeah, jobs and local employment, growth, social, healthy environment, innovation last. So a lot of people have gone for jobs, which is quite good, seeing as my next slide is pretty much focusing on that. Excellent. Okay, so what you have in front of you, and I've probably got a couple of minutes, so I'll whiz through this in no time. This is how we looked at delivering social value on 2 Chamberlain Square. As you heard from Rob, it's the one that we pretty much went into all guns blazing. So we had 110 full-time equivalent direct employees. That doesn't actually reflect the real number, but when you have to factor in the full-time equivalency, 642 people who worked on site equates to 110 full-time. Interestingly, 40% of the local people were within 10 miles of the site, so we did go for employing local. And as Rob said, there's a lot of very, very deprived wards around Birmingham. The 9 that we particularly focus on included Ladywood, and Rob mentioned there we did help out with the Santa's Grotto, which was a rather unusual request from the local community centre. 65 staff hours, that doesn't sound a lot, but that's a lot of site visits for school and college students to have a look around the sites. 170 weeks of apprenticeships on the contract. Again, we manage this project with half an eye on the future for whoever's coming in from the M&E side as well as carpentry. 44 hours dedicated support to young people in work. Again, that is trying to get people who are very hard to reach into the jobs market. And a number of weeks spent on meaningful work experience and placements. One of the major areas we focus on is buying local, and as you can see there, £21.45 million was spent within the local supply chain on that project. We spent 15 hours doing expert business. That's me essentially going in and doing health and safety training for the supply chain. And then the healthier, safer, more resilient communities elements, we spent 214 hours working on local volunteering projects around Paradise, and also managed to get donations of around just over £6,000 towards local projects. And those projects were run in partnership with Prince's Trust and West Midlands Police. So the final two images you can see on the slide are essentially some of the hardest to reach young people in Birmingham who we managed to work with during community projects. So we could see that they turned up on time, and that they were actually going to be grafting. And both Elliot in the top and Ram at the bottom were two of the hardest working young people. So we worked with the police to secure funding for CSCS cards and getting them onto site with our supply chain. So ultimately, that's the journey that we take. We engage these people through doing talks, through training, through community projects, through work experience, and hopefully when they do what I call their passing out at the end of their 12-week program, we're there with an offer of employment, whether that's with the supply chain or with BAM. So thank you very much. That's me.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob and Phil. I think for me, the things that really struck with me are the words that you were talking about. There's making them about working with the supply chain. It's about making them feel proud, working with people and creating trust, and early engagement. That you emphasise that the importance of early engagement if you're going to be delivering social value. A question from me: are there any lessons learned or what you do differently around early engagement with the supply chain? Maybe if you could go for the shorter answer.
Okay. I mean, you have to keep continuing it. I mean, we've been working with BAM probably for 30 years, I should think, Phil. I think probably something like that. We have other contractors that we've joined with recently. I think there's an element of saying when we say open book and working with the supply chain early, we really mean it, and some people don't believe it because there's a lot of people who refer to the word partnering, but it's a one-way partnering. So for us, it is constantly has to be worked on about that early engagement. Too many times we still come across where we have a main contractor and they just don't get the fact that ultimately it is the supply chain that deliver. And actually, we want the supply chain there sat at the table with us, fully transparent with the main contractor to work out the best solutions to deliver whatever we're delivering.
Okay, thank you. That's great. And then we've got a question here. So Claire earlier on talked about inputs, outputs and outcomes. We've got a question from Debbie Bewley. Where are we at in terms of assessment on the outcomes being completed? Where are things at on that?
Is that sorry, from my perspective?
Yes, sorry, Rob. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, what we're doing now, because obviously the phase one is now just open. We are now putting together a social value report. We were due to get that out this summer, but that was a case of interviewing everybody across the city, both in terms of local stakeholders and business stakeholders. But unfortunately, we've decided literally as yesterday that we're going to delay that because obviously the current environment has created a very strange world, and we want to be able to interview people on the streets, local community, and of course people for various reasons are not on the streets. So for us, that assessment and that report is something very much so. It'd be fair to say that we're preparing a background for it, but hopefully by next spring, when life turns back to normal, we'll be able to then publish what the impact and hope positive impact of what we're doing at Paradise will come forward. We've already done that down at King's Cross, and that's available, but that's exactly what we're doing up in Birmingham as well.
We could maybe circulate that with when we send out the slides, the outcomes from King's Cross, if that's okay.
Yep.
And we'll do one more question. So coming back to section 106 seems to be providing some challenges. So we had a question. Number of councils are still using one apprentice per £1 million worth of construction cost through section 106, which on large schemes is not available. So do you have that kind of dialogue with local authorities? And I suppose that's one for Rob, for you again, but Phil, feel free to...
When we negotiated the 106 back in 2012-13, and my apologies, I've forgotten the name of the department of Birmingham City Council, we spent a lot of time working with their sort of, if you like, their job people at the time, and we didn't. They have various criteria. What we negotiated was a position where we would support, and at that time we had, I think BAM weren't quite on board at that stage, but we were working with Carillion, who, to be fair to say, were very, very good. And we came up with a solution about local recruitment. And I think it's the point that Phil picked up about within the radius of the development. We didn't get into exact numbers, to be fair to say. What we did do was very much encouraging working with our contractor about local recruitment and apprentices. And to be fair to say to Carillion, that they also were very good at it. There was a significant apprenticeship intake, but also very importantly, they took on people. I remember meeting a few individuals that were homeless. They actually took people that were homeless on as well. And this is 4 or 5 years ago, probably ahead of everybody else in terms of giving them an opportunity to get into the construction industry. So again, it goes back to my point. We're not driven by, if I'm being honest, it's the right thing to do. I think it's the expression, and as much as the world's becoming much more of a tick box process or organisation, we need to demonstrate that we're much more driven around what we feel is the right thing to do, and I think that's the thing we try to put through to everybody that we work with.
Fantastic. A great way to close as well. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Phil. That was really interesting. Okay, so we're going to move on now to hear a very different perspective, looking at from an SME perspective, social enterprise, looking at the kinds of business benefits that can be felt as well from delivering social value. So I'm going to hand over to Bruce, who's one of the co-founders at Ethstat Ethical Stationery.
Hi, bingo. So Ethstat Ethical Stationery, we are a community interest cooperative, which makes us fairly unique. I guess if you were to look at social enterprises from a sliding scale between limited company at one end and charity at the other, we are about as close to a charity as you could probably get, in that we are 100% not-for-profit. We don't just give money away to charities and in that kind of charitable giving, but we really are actively engaging in the lives of the people. We seek to help either through employment, trade, training, and service. Worth noting that in previous lives, my other co-founder, Yasmin, was a carer for a family member with dementia. So we have a special emphasis on that. But also that I was homeless for a while, which gave me a different perspective. Things that make us different are, again, I guess, if you have a look at the briefing paper, it's got an importance on the understanding the product provenance of the supply chain, which is something that we're really big on. But before we kind of go through the specifics, or should I say, rather than go through the specifics of the case study that's in the briefing paper, I think it might be better, particularly for SME delegates who are watching this, to go back and look at the drivers for our partner organisation, Smart Energy, and why they wanted to work with us. I also see that we have a delegate from Ferrovial with us. Hi, Julia. It has to be said that if I was going to write an update on the case study today, it would be probably on one of the two projects we've completed, either for Amy or Ferrovial, because, well, frankly, they were really brilliant, and you're going to see a bit of them later on anyway. Okay, so when you have a look at the drivers, there's a lot of things that you'd expect to see in there. You'd expect to see staff engagement as being a big issue, as has already been mentioned, stakeholder engagement, and this idea of it's just good business. But one of the things that I would say is really worthwhile for us to kind of scoot on with is this idea of cost control. You know, there has been an assumption in any project which looks at the environment that there has to be some kind of cost increase. I would argue that any time that you're looking at the wider picture, certainly, of social value, and anytime you're looking at the wider picture, particularly of environmental projects, then really there is much more kind of a cost benefit, and it should almost be expected to have a cost saving to it. The reason being that when you have a look at any kind of environmental issue, then you're really talking about reducing consumption as much as anything else, and that's a big part of it. I think another thing that when you go back and have a look at some of the things that were spoken about earlier, that maybe Rob was talking about and kind of hinting at, is that if you're talking about building any kind of business resilience for the future, then I think that neurological diversity is actually really important. By which I mean, I exist in a situation in South London where there are over 200 languages spoken in our downtown area in Croydon. And when you have that amount of people in there from those kind of different backgrounds, they have very different perspectives on the world. And indeed, those perspectives can really help deliver resilience to an organization in changing times. If we were to then have a look at how we engage with our customers. So the project itself was about delivering an environmental benefit and reducing their environmental impact. But it's worthwhile, again, kind of looking at what we do and how we do it. When we engage with a customer, we take on a number of hats. We are part supplier, part marketing agency, and part CSR policy. Our aim is to make our partners look good by engaging with them in a curated project that delivers transparent social value. In this case, it was an environmental value. If this sounds a little cynical, perhaps, then understand this. Our social mission is no joke. We are highly committed, highly motivated, incredibly passionate people who really want to build a new society, but we understand that we cannot do it alone. We need partners to work with, and we know that to build our mission and our values, we need to articulate our successes. We want our partners to look good by doing good and kind of getting the credit for it. If you think that sounds a little bit airy-fairy, then consider this. Over the last 6 months, this is the time during the lockdown, then our partner organizations have reported either increased turnover or increased client base or funding. And the ones that have engaged with us the most have been the ones which have grown the most. Although I would suggest that's probably nothing to do with us, but maybe it's the kind of organizations that we're dealing with. So here were the measurable benefits for smart energy. I'll just let you scan through that. But as maybe hinted at in the last kind of few slides and the last presentation that Rob gave, the world has moved on and changed since this briefing paper was published. You know, 2020 has been a year like no other, and perhaps its closest relationship was with 2008. So what was the reaction to the banking crash? Well, if anyone remembers the big society, well, that was actually really important for the social enterprise movement to gain a toehold within government and within the wider economic kind of businesses that are out there. And also in America, there was the election of Barack Obama, which again shouldn't be kind of skirted of, you know, we're too far away to maybe make a difference. For many agitating for a progressive social change, though, we felt that 2008 was an opportunity missed, and that perhaps there is more to be done. And what have we had this year? Well, we've had BLM, We've had the Clap for Carers and Crucially Build Back Better. A poll today released by B-Lab said that 72% of the UK public believe that businesses should have a legal responsibility to the planet and the people. 76% believe that UK business should be responsible to protect the natural environment. And almost all of them favoured brands that said that they would do good in the world. The bottom line is this, is that as we move in a post-lockdown world, we will going to be held increasingly to account, I believe, anyway. So if we can move on to the video, if that's possible. Sophie? Hello? Hello?
Sorry, I'm not sure what's happened, Sophie.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want to maybe move on to the next slide?
Yeah, I'll move on to the
and
next
then come
slide
back to that one. Thanks.
Oh, here we go. So we believe in maybe showing rather than telling is a good thing to do here. So this is a recent project that we undertook with Amy, which will maybe demonstrate the kind of things that we do and the way that we kind of behave.
So we're really delighted to get in contact with Ethical Stationery, who have been able to source and package and distribute over 15,000 face coverings, which are going to be sent to all our employees, all our teams, as a gesture to look after their well-being during this challenging time.
My key worker, who's helped me out throughout the years, Shona, brought me forward to help out another good cause, to help get the word out and spread the word about helping people with homelessness and people with mental health. So yeah, I'm here to help another good cause.
I'm here because I needed something to do. I have really bad mental health, so this got me out of the house, meet new people.
Social enterprises, I think, have a really important role here because they can innovate, they can do interesting things, they can use the money that they make and put it back into the work that they're doing, so they can help people get into employment and they can provide services that we need.
We need to do additional work with the disadvantaged community. We need to ensure that there are projects that supports them so they can do their bit.
It helps social enterprise in delivering a really quality product, and it helps society in helping homeless people and unemployed and those disadvantaged, where we can do something to support them in their lives.
So when you have a look at that, I mean, that kind of gives an idea of what we're looking for here in a really good project. It's something which fully integrates the people who we're trying to help, homeless people, giving them real jobs, some real opportunities, some training. And the fallout from that has been really interesting, in as much as, you know, the website that we created for it is still getting lots of hits, the LinkedIn campaign's been brilliant. But we've got board members for Amy who are going out of their way to engage with rough sleepers and help them find jobs. That's not something that I've seen before. So I'm going to skip on to the very last slide that I have anyway. And just to say, if you're a SME and you want to get involved with the social enterprise, then I think it's a really good thing for obvious reasons that are on the slide. But I'd ask yourself a few questions. The first one is, you'd ask, who regulates the social enterprise? Are they a limited company or a KIC? That makes a huge difference in the kind of outcomes you're going to get. I would ask the social enterprise that you're looking to work with, how many social enterprises are in their supply chain? And can you have a much wider impact than just working with one? And finally, I'd ask, how does the social enterprise, how will the social enterprise you're looking to work with engage with your staff, with your customers, to build commitment and build your reputation? And I would also say that finally, when you want to work with organizations like us, you kind of need to move beyond box ticking and into genuine engagement and get a kind of feel for what we are and how embedded we are within our communities. So that's kind of all I would have to say about working with an SME.
Thank you, Bruce. That was fantastic and some really great, helpful, just practical advice there at the end. And linking back to what you were talking about around, there is that myth, isn't there, that the sustainable option is always going to be more expensive, and it's up to us all to help to dispel that myth, because, as you say, especially with environmental issues as well, you know, reducing carbon, reducing waste, they all go hand in hand with cost savings. So do we have any questions? Do we have any questions for Bruce? Okay. In that case, thanks so much, Bruce. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Bye.
Okay. Right. So I wanted to introduce our last speaker. So we're going to hear now from Elliot at Recycling Lives. And they're a really interesting business, and that we're going to hear about how they create environmental and financial value from activities, as well as delivering significant social value. So, Elliot, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks, EJ, and thank you everyone for joining today. I'm Elliot Harrison, Head of Business Development at Recycling Lives. So today I just wanted to talk through some of the work that we're doing within the construction sector, but how that allows us to go on and deliver social impact through a few different streams and work programs that we run. So Recycling Lives, we're a £200 million nationwide metal and waste recycling business. We operate 19 sites across the country. We employ over 500 people, and a lot of the work that we do is within the built environment. So provide a total waste management service to the construction sector. There's, I'm sure, quite a few people on this call today who we're already working with. But through that, it allows us to deliver social impact through the various programs that I'm going to talk about today. So to start with, just wanted to get some thoughts from the audience on how much waste you think is produced from the UK construction sector as a proportion of the overall amount of waste produced in the UK. So yeah, seems a lot of people have got that right. So 59%, close to 60% of the waste produced in the UK comes from the construction sector. So that could be from demolition, new build, refurb, etc. But it accounts for a huge proportion of the waste that's being generated in the UK at the moment. So how Recycling Lives get engaged in that side of things? As I said earlier, we provide a total waste management service, so that could be in the demolition sector. So we handle around 450,000 tonnes of scrap metal each year, which we process through what's called metal fragmentizers, which gives us export-grade scrap. We provide skip hire services to the construction sector to handle the general waste that they're producing. And we advise them on the compliance as well to make sure that they're fully compliant when it comes towards waste management. We do that through operating a number of our own facilities. So as I said earlier, we've got 19 sites ourselves across the country, but we also have a supply chain of around 300 subcontractors that we work with to provide a service in areas that we can't. And we look to make sure that they share the same views as us when it comes towards social impact. So today, the main point of what I wanted to talk about is how we're changing the way that business is done through looking at how we can deliver social impact through the way that we operate as a business already. So Recycling Lives' key focus is to reduce reoffending. support the homeless, and tackle food poverty. Through these different initiatives over the last 4 years, we've delivered £28.3 million in social impact. We're currently running one of the most successful offender rehabilitation programs in the country, with a success rate of 96%. And we're redistributing surplus food to charities and community interest groups across Lancashire and Cumbria. So I just wanted to get the thoughts of the audience on what the national reoffending rate is in the UK. So yeah, again, a lot of you have got that right. It's 64%. So at the moment, if you go into prison, you're more likely to go back into prison after serving that sentence. And there's a number of reasons for that. So firstly, once you're released from prison, you've got a criminal record, and a lot of employers aren't willing to engage with ex-offenders. You might find that you also have no money upon release. So there's a bursary available for £47, which isn't really going to get you too far. And you also might find that you have nowhere to live upon release as well. So you suddenly find yourself in this position where you're kind of forced to reoffend, because you find that you either can't feed yourself or you've got no money coming in. So what we look to do is to cut that right down. So as I said earlier, we've got one of the most successful offender rehabilitation programs in the country, and we've been able to bring that figure down to just less than 4% for the reoffending rate. And we do that by tackling those areas which I just mentioned. So we pay the most that we can do within a prison to ensure that the people that we're working with have a good amount of money behind them upon release. We ensure that we're finding employment for the men and women that we're working with, and that could be with our supply chain, it could be with our clients, it could be internally at Recycling Lives, it could be with some of yourselves in the audience today. And finally, we look to make sure that they've got somewhere to live upon release as well. So just by tackling those few things, that's how we've been so successful in running that programme. And it's led to us growing the initiative from working just in one prison around 8 years ago to now operating in 11 prisons. And we work with around 300 serving offenders at any one point. Tina, who's on the screen at the moment, her story is just one that I wanted to share with you. So Tina had been in and out of HMP style in Manchester for a number of years. And she found that each time that she was coming back out of prison, she was surrounded by the same people again, and she ended up just in that cycle of what a lot of other people are, which is they come out of prison and they go on to reoffend, and they just end up becoming another one of those starts, which is the 64% of the people that go on to reoffend. So Tina started working with us in style, and we quickly identified that the area that she was going back to was one of the key reasons why she was going on to reoffend. So coming up to her release, we identified somewhere for her to relocate to. We found a job for her, and it was actually internally at Recycling Lives. And we asked her what she wanted to do. So she said she wanted to be a crane driver, and we've supported her in doing that. So she's got her licenses to operate a crane now, which Recycling Lives supported in. And she's now the site manager of one of our satellite sites near Preston. So she's a great example of how someone can go from being a negative drain on society and costing the taxpayer however much to keep them incarcerated, to turning a life around and making a positive impact through doing so as well. So as part of that support in helping people transition from the life in prison to a life on the outside, Recycling Lives operate a homeless residential centre, and this could be both for people who are street homeless, or it could be for someone similar to Tina who who finds that they're coming up for release and they may have nowhere to live. So we've been running that centre for 12 years now, and it's aimed at supporting people in the long term. So it's not a bed for the evening, it's more so a place where people can come to us, take time out, and over a period of maybe 9 to 12 months, get back on the feet and get back into accommodation, find employment and get the finances sorted again. So Chris is an example of one of those people which has worked through that programme. Chris was sentenced in his 30s for the first time. He found that upon release, he again, it's similar to a lot of what I've just been saying, he found himself in that position where he had no money and he had no accommodation to go to. So Chris came to us, to the residential centre, and at first he didn't quite settle in. Neil, the chap on the right who runs the centre, he's quite a taskmaster with the guys that come in, and he's quite strict with them in making sure that they get back on top of stuff. And Chris didn't feel he was in that place just yet, so he ended up meeting a girl, and he moved to another homeless residential centre. But Neil stayed in touch with him throughout that period, and Chris quickly realised that there wasn't any opportunities available to him for just going to another hostel that he was in. So he stayed in touch with Neil, and he decided that the time was right for him to come back to Recycling Lives. So he worked with us for an extended period, and through that time we supported him to get into a career in hospitality, which he has now gone on to leave the residential centre, and he's in a stable career now and back on his own 2 feet. So one of the final things that we do is redistribute surplus food from landfill. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on how much food waste you think there is in the UK each year which is sent to landfill. Yeah, so there's currently 9.5 million tonnes of waste, of food waste sent to landfill each year. And this comes from a variety of sources, whether it's from households, from retailers, from people in the food production supply chain, manufacturers, etc. But there's a huge amount of food waste currently going to landfill in the UK. So Recycling Lives decided to start working with a national charity called FairShare in around 2017, and FairShare hold arrangements with a lot of the producers of food waste, so the big retailers and manufacturers, and it's to take the surplus food away from being waste. So it's not waste food, it's just something which is surplus to requirements. So it could be that the packaging's slightly wrong on it, it could be that it's been branded up for a certain time of year, so it could be Valentine's Day, you get packaging which has hearts on it, and then as soon as that period passes, the retailers don't want that stocked on the shelves anymore. So we now get that food coming into us, and we work with around 240 charities in Lancashire and Cumbria, and we send that food back out to them so they can continue to do whatever they do. So Pendleside Hospice is just an example of one of those charities which has benefited from that programme. So they're clearly there to provide respite care to people. They're not there to provide food. It's just something that they have to do as part of operating as a charity. And by them accessing the food from Recycling Lives, they've been able to save around £18,000 a year on their food bill. And when you have a look at a lot of the charities that we're working with, they're not the big national charities that have access to £1 million worth of funding. The small charities that, if you can save £18,000 on your food bills, it can make a huge difference to potentially getting another nurse in part-time and helping more people through that. So through that centre, we're serving around 1 million meals a year now. So it's had a huge impact to the lives of people within Lancashire and Cumbria. and more so at this time. So we found that there's even more food surplus at the moment, but there's clearly more people which need access to it as well. So that's been extremely busy over the last 4 months as we've been supporting people through this period. So that's Recycling Lives. There's a few ways that you can get engaged with us. So it could be looking at working with Recycling Lives on your waste streams. A lot of the waste that we handle can be processed within a prison. I didn't have too much time today to touch on the waste types that we process within prison, but please do feel free to get in touch with me if you want to discuss that in a bit more detail. You can look at working with us to find employment for the men and women that we work with in prison. So as I said, there's around 300 men and women that we're working within the prisons at any one point. So that could be either for something called release on temporary license, where they go out and do a full day's work with an employer, but you can look at taking them on upon release as well. You could look at providing volunteers to some of the programs that we run, or you could offer in-kind support to the charity as well. There's many ways to engage with Recycling Lives. So if you want to find out more, then please do get in touch with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elliot. That was a fantastic insight into all that incredibly valuable work that you do. So do we have any questions for Elliot? And whilst you're having a think, I just wanted to mention that in the chat, somebody, Bruce, had obviously been inspiring people because there's been a request for are there any good central resources to find appropriate social enterprises to partner with. So there's some links in the chat, and we'll include those when we send out the slides as well. So if anyone has any other good databases or links, please do just pop those in there. Supplychange.co.uk is one of them, and unltd.org.uk is another. Okay, any other questions? Any questions for Elliot?
So I've seen there's a few there. So initially from yes, the partnership in Cumbria is working particularly well. So just in this forum today, I guess it's a great example of how you can get your supply chain to deliver more social impact through awarding contracts. So in this case, we was bidding for a contract with Sellafield for the scrap metal contract, and we wrote into the bid, if we were successful in securing that contract, we'd open up a number of food collection points up the west coast of Cumbria, where there's quite a lot of food poverty. That helped us to secure the contract with Sellafield, which we won maybe 4 years ago or so. And since then, we've opened up the food collection points in Cumbria, and that's sustaining around another 60 charities in Cumbria as a direct result of awarding a contract to someone based off the social impact that they could deliver through that bid. So, yeah, great example of how you can start to look at different ways to deliver social impact from bid stage right through to delivering it right at the end as well. Question on DBS checks. So it's around 40% of our workforce, which have worked through one of the programs that I've mentioned. So we look at making sure that the workforce size going out and servicing our client sites is the correct one to be doing so. So if you're working in a school, for instance, it may be that you can't access one of the programs that we're running, but you can still access the services because we have, as I said, hundreds of staff which don't necessarily meet that criteria. But by you choosing to trade with Recycling Lives, it enables us to continue doing the other stuff that we're doing. So it continues to provide that additional social impact, even just by spending the money with Recycling Lives, even though you can't necessarily directly be involved in some of those programs if you do have barriers when it comes towards DBS checks, etc.
Okay, well, we've got one more question here. It's an interesting one. So this is from Stacey Burton saying, we do use Recycling Lives. Do you let us know what you do as part of the offering, or do we need to ask?
We are quite present when it comes towards marketing and letting people know what we do. Sometimes it doesn't always feed through the organisations that we're working with. So there's many main contractors that we're working with, and when you're looking at multi-billion-pound organisations, it may be that the message of what Recycling Lives is doing doesn't necessarily get out as much as it could do. But no, you shouldn't need to ask what we're doing. We do try to make it well known that by engaging with Recycling Lives, it's helping us to deliver on a lot of these programs, which I've just talked about.
I think not so much with your own organisation, but very often we do hear many of our school members kind of in conversations or discussions saying, I had no idea that this, not your organisation, but an SME or a type of business, were doing all this fantastic work. And I think sometimes, especially within SMEs as well, they're doing a lot that's delivering social value, but perhaps they don't badge it as that and therefore think that they should be telling people about it. So I would say from my perspective, if you're doing good work, to attendees who are on this joining us today, make sure you're telling your customers about it. Kind of sounds obvious, but sometimes we don't always do that.
Yeah, so
Okay.
a good way that we found of doing that is we produce a social value report each year, which I'm guessing that was right at the start of this call today around how you produce social value reports. And
not a glossy one though.
No. So we've been doing that for the last 4 years, and the approach of doing so has changed considerably over that time as well. So now we're more focused on the qualitative part of it and understanding the stories of the people that we've worked with, and hoping that by communicating those with our customers and supply chain, it kind of inspires them to see how they could be doing something similar. So we do produce that each year, and that is circulated with our customers. So hopefully, again, a lot of people on this call do end up seeing that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Elliot. That was really great. Thank you. Okay, so we've got a few more minutes to go. So I've got the lucky last slot. So I'm just going to do a quick whiz through some of the types of resources that we've got within the school that can help around social value, and also just signpost us, talk about some of the new features that are on the school web platform. If you do need to leave the webinar early, please use the feedback link that's going to be in the chat to provide your feedback. Okay, so we now have 101 partners leading and steering the work of the school, which is fantastic. We were delighted to see that I think it was 5 new partners have joined between April, May and June. So I think that's a really positive message around the importance of sustainability. It's not going away. There are lots of other priorities at the moment, but sustainability, what we're hearing from our partners is, it's very much at the top of their agenda. So we have a range of different partners, as you can see on here. We've got a lot of infrastructure clients like Network Rail, Highways England. We've got organisations like Canary Wharf Group. We've got pretty much all your main contractors on there. We've got a very active home builder group as well, so Taylor Wimpey, Bellway, Barratt Developments, Barclay Group, and so on. We have some FM service providers like MCOR, and then a number of suppliers and specialist contractors. So it's these organisations who fund the school to make it available for free, so we can run events like today, and so that you can access all of the resources that we have. Within the school, if you're using the school search engine, you can search by topic. So we've got those different topics there: sustainability management, offsite, lean, and BIM, which will soon be a wider digital department. Sustainability sits at the heart of the school, and actually those other 4 areas there are almost enablers for delivering a more sustainable built environment, but we do have resources there for you to look at. From a social value perspective, if you were to go to the social value pages, there's almost 4 kind of buckets or headings for those, as you can see in front of you. Biodiversity, air quality, clearly those are all very much part of the social value agenda as well, and you can find those within the school as well. These are examples of some of the resources that the school has developed and collaborated with our partners and published. So the first one Claire talked about earlier on, that's been published by Action Sustainability in the school. And this is very much a piece of research and a survey of our school partners. And the aim of it really is to help our members understand the social value expectations of their customers and to help them be better prepared to meet them. So there's loads and loads of practical information in there. So I would say if you do nothing else after today, make sure you have a look at what's in there, because it's almost like a toolkit there that can help you. and it's relevant to all size businesses as well. If we've got any designers or architects or those who influence the design side of things, we've got the social value and design of the built environment that we published a few years ago now, but it's still very relevant, and we worked with REBA on that. And it looks at how designers and architects can generate social value in line with the REBA plan of work. And then we've got the Common Social Impact Framework for Rail that Claire's already talked about. And that has a library of goals, indicators, metrics, monetized values as well that you can have a look at. And it's publicly available, so you can have a look at that. This is just to give you an idea of the types of resources that we've got. So here we've got sustainability shorts and toolbox talks, so 2 to 3 minute animations, for example, one there on air quality. That's really great at helping organisations understand what's the issue, why is air quality such a high priority issue at the moment, and what can we do on sites to help address that. There's one there on community liaison and how to deal with conflict on sites. And then you've got case studies. We've got videos from some of our partners talking about, well, what does social value mean to me? Because actually, probably what we've heard today is that it can mean so many different things. And we'd always recommend, if your client's asking you about social value, ask them what they mean as well. What do they mean by social value? We have one of the school's working groups is the Labour group, and they've been working on bringing together all of those people challenges that are bigger now than ever, and bringing them together into one workforce strategy. So we've got the People Matter Charter. That consists of 8 commitments, ranging from, it covers equality, training, workforce culture, modern slavery, skills and training, and so on. And the idea is there's 8 commitments that can apply to any organisation, again, regardless of size. And we've got just under 60 signatories, a number of SMEs in there as well. So again, please do have a look at that. So almost leaving social value behind a little bit, I just wanted to highlight some of the latest features that we've got through the school that are available for you for free. So if you sign up to the school, as you all have done because you're here today, you can access a personal dashboard and a company dashboard. So here on the personal dashboard, you can access lots of different reports, but it's interesting at the bottom there under My Activity, you can see how much CPD time you've accrued, which events you've been to. You can look at all the resources that you've accessed in the past, which events you're booked onto. In the middle there, it says personal action plan. You can see that Emily has been allocated 2 resources. What that means is one of their colleagues has completed one of the free sustainability maturity assessments. After they've had that, they've had an action plan that said, this is a good resource for you. Let's say it was the air quality toolbox talk, and they've thought, that's not relevant for me, but it's relevant for my colleague, and they can allocate that. So useful to know that feature's there. On the left-hand side, underneath the photograph, you can see that Emily's got 5 certificates. So again, if you're attending events like today or completing CPD accredited e-learning on the school, you get your certificates there. The badges, this is something new that you will start to see or hear about. Very soon we're going to be launching these learning pathways through the school, where our partners can set learning pathways for their supply chain. What do we mean by a learning pathway? It may be a case of they select a group of suppliers and they say, we would like you to complete this e-learning module, have a look at this video, look at this toolkit, and do all this by a certain date. And once they've completed it, they get a badge and it would appear on the dashboard. So moving on to look at the company dashboard, you can see here at the top what your level of membership is. So you've got, remember with the school, you have your levels of membership. You've got bronze, silver and gold. And you can see where you're at. And if you've got your bronze badge, for example, you can see what you need to do to get your silver badge, the next level up. Again, remember with the school, there are no costs to anything at all. The badges are about how engaged you are in the school. Interestingly, if you're thinking, well, how do I compare to my peers within your own category, you can do that at the bottom there. It says industry benchmark. So you can select on the right hand side from the drop down, you can select your trade category and have a look at how you're comparing based on your own self-assessment. What we find is that many of our members, I think it's about 30,000 now, they very often use information on the company dashboards to do screenshots or to pull off reports to put into their tenders or to share with customers. And then on the left-hand side here, you can see, again, you've got targets there. So it may be that at some point in the future, you may receive an alert through the school saying one of your customers, it will name the customer, has set you a target to get to silver by a certain date or secure your bronze badge, that kind of thing. And that's where that would appear as well, if any targets have been set. And further down, sorry, go back. I can't see it on my screen, but further down on there as well, on your company dashboard, you can look at the total amount of CPD time that has been accrued by everybody within your business. So again, that's really interesting to look at if you're asked a question by your customers, how are you developing your own organization's knowledge around sustainability? There's lots of information and reports in here to help. And if you're keen to see who else from my business is engaged, you can view that on the dashboard as well. It just says view colleagues and you can see a list of everybody there. Okay, so this is my last slide. We're 2 minutes overrunning, so bear with me, I'll be finished in 2. We've heard a lot of talk about the benefits of delivering social value and also about the business benefit side of things as well. Thinking about that, here is another, I suppose, compelling case as to why we would recommend you get active with the school. We did a survey at the beginning of this year, before COVID, to understand how the school is helping organisations and what's the impact on business performance. We had just over 1,000 responses, and I think they're quite strong stats in that, you know, just under half of our members said they believed the school or engaging with the school had helped them win new business. 57% said they'd reduce their reputational risk, so that can link to things like whether it's modern slavery, social value. There's a whole raft of issues there. Improving quality of bids, I think through learning through the school and all the resources that we've got in the events, it's an opportunity to find out more about your customers' priorities and upskill in the areas that are relevant to you. So that's my finishing slide. So does anybody have any questions before we close? Somebody's asking about the slides. Yes, we'll send all the slides out to everybody after today. And I can't see any more questions. So I think on that note then, thanks everybody. Thank you all the speakers for your time. It's been a really interesting morning. And thanks for all the questions and for the engagement. So please do have a look at the events calendar with the school. We've got pretty much events running most days on a wide range of different topics. So thank you very much. Please do get in touch and we'll be sending you out the slides very shortly. Thank you.